Good evening. Good evening. Please take your seat, and you can come a bit closer to the screen if you like. Welcome to the Siam Society, and welcome to the lecture this evening. But before I introduce Dr. Nicolas Revire, I would like to introduce a little bit more about our upcoming lectures. By the way, I'm Tom Vichakun, one of the council member here and also the chair for the Siam Society Lecture Subcommittee. Next week on Valentine's Day, if you don't have a date, on Thursday 14, you can come to a lecture before or after the date. A creative karma, the fall of Ayutthaya and Mozart's flute music. It's a very intriguing topic by Stephen Martin, or Professor Stephen Martin. Now you have to find out about this next week. Then in March, on the 7th of March, we continue the lecture series on contemporary design in Thailand. The first one was done by a national artist, Khmer Somchai on fashion, and this one will be about photography. The topic will be rediscovering Thai masters of photography during 1950 to 1970 by Kun Manit Siwanachapum, who's a very, very well-known and good artist who used photography as his medium. Now, this evening, there will be a talk on the birth of the Buddha from Angkor to Bangkok by Dr. Nicolas Revire, who's also a lecturer at the Thammasat University. Now, as a Buddhist, the Buddha's birth is one of the most significant events on his life history. His birth, when he enlightened, when he gave the first sermon, and when he went on to parinirvana. As a Buddhist, and when I was young, we listened or learned about this sort of as a tale. But when I'm older, I thought, who would walk different steps would have lotuses on his steps? Because Buddhism or Buddhist teaching also teaches us to think and not to believe everything as it is or everything that you hear or read or hearsay. Now, this is one of the allegory that shows why people believe in miracles or mythical things that happen around the birth of Buddha. Thank you again, Dr. Nicolas Revire, for honoring us this evening. Please, thank you. Merci beaucoup.
So good evening, all. I'm quite happy to see many familiar faces here, friends from the National Museum, volunteers group, and others. So without further ado, the talk tonight is about a specific carved stele. Oops, I'm sorry. Okay. A carved stele made of sandstone that is today kept at the National Museum of Bangkok, and which was actually found at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, as I will illustrate a bit further. So this talk today will be split in two parts mainly. The first part is the police investigation I've been tracing over the past year or so in my research, tracing back in the archives, mainly photographic archives, and so on and so forth, evidence for the discovery of this stele at Angkor Wat, and how and when and by whom it was brought to Bangkok. And the second part, I will discuss the style, not so much the style, but more the iconography, what basically is the content displayed on this stele in details, looking at textual sources and comparing with other art piece showing the birth of the future Buddha. And overall, this is part of a research project I'm doing now, which focuses on the advent, the emergence of Theravāda Buddhism in a region. And here, mainly at Angkor. We're looking at Angkor in a period, in the late Angkor period, and try to understand how and when exactly the Theravāda Buddhism took roots there. So this is the stele. It's a high relief made of sandstone. The height is about 80 centimeters, let's say, in height. And it is shown normally in the South Gallery of the National Museum, where the so-called Lumbini Khmer art objects are kept. And this is normally kept just outside, not inside the gallery, but outside. And for those who know, the stele is quite close, displayed quite close to the wall. So you can't really see the back. But some time ago, a couple of years ago, I had a closer look at this piece. I was quite intrigued because it's such a rare episode of the birth shown in Buddhist art in the region. For this early period, we have a lot of mural paintings dating from later period, but from the early period, it's quite rare. This is actually the only one I know from Cambodia and even Thailand. And as I looked closer, I spotted inscriptions on it, as I will show you. Now, this is some new evidence I found recently while being in Paris a couple of months ago. This gentleman named Lucien de la Porte was a French architect, as I can say, living in the 19th century. And he was part of the Mekong exploration mission with Doudard de Lagrée and others. And he traveled several times in Angkor in the 1870s up till 1881. That was his last trip in Angkor. And then he went back to Paris and he established the Khmer Art Museum. At the time, the Khmer Museum did not exist yet, or not as we know it today. And so he established a Khmer Museum at the Trocadero Palace. And he started to make collection of pieces from Cambodia, and as well as plasters cast that were molded from Angkor and other sites and brought back to Paris. So the original are still in Cambodia, but he brought back the plasters cast. And in around 1887, he could not go back himself to Cambodia for some health reason, but he made recommendations on his personal travel book with a drawing, as you can see here, and this one too, of pieces, objects that he has personally seen at Angkor Wat on his previous trips. So this is a recommendation book, instruction notebook to Lucien Fournereau, another French archaeologist who went behind him. And basically he told him, if you see this piece, it should be in 1,000 galleries at Angkor Wat, make good photographs, okay? So basically this is this inscription here. And then I found this rare old photograph from the French archives. The photograph is undated. It was thought to be photographed by this gentleman, de la Porte. But actually, I think this was taken by Fournereau because of this previous evidence. So if that is the case, then this photograph may be dated to around 1887. And so here, interestingly, you see the same stele that I'm talking about today in Bangkok, still in situ in around late 19th century at Angkor Wat. And more precisely, for those who know Angkor Wat, the so-called 1,000 Buddhas Gallery around the central sanctuary, where many other Buddha images and objects have been gathered and kept over the centuries, and still today, to this date. So this is the oldest photograph I know of the object. And then there are copies, replicas, that I found. This one is kept in France. It's a molding, exactly the same size. So this is a mold, what we call a plaster cast. And it's kept in France. And there is more in Cambodia. This is another early photograph published here in a book by, what's his name, Dieu le Fils. Dieu le Fils was a French photographer visiting Cambodia in the early 20th century, and this is the original photograph. This is another photograph I found in the French archives of the same. I'm sure this is a replica and not the original. Reason for it is look at the top part, which is different from the original. You see this part? So this is the original, whereas this is the replica. And this object, this replica, is today at Wat Plum, at the center of Phnom Penh. As you go up the stairs here with replicas of nagas, balustrades from Angkor Wat, you approach, you go to the first terrace, and here you find the replica now incrusted in the wall. Okay? So I've been showing this to my friends in Cambodia, and they were surprised, amazed that this was only a replica, not the original. Now, back to the original. A few, maybe 6 months ago, or last year, the stele was taken out from its original place, from the South Gallery to the temporary exhibition room at the National Museum for some temporary exhibition. And this was a rare chance for me and others to see the back, where we knew there was a reference in a book that there was an inscription on the back. So this is it. Fortunately, it's very faded. You can't read much, and my photographs are not very good, but you can kind of see that there are at least 3-4 lines maybe in what we call Old Khmer. Okay, this is a close-up. I'm not expert in Khmer epigraphy, but at least I can read and confirm the reading here that this is Shri something. This is a rubbing of the same inscription that was down many years ago, and the rubbing is kept in France. Fortunately, the rubbing is not of much help, as you can see, for the reading. With the help of others, epigraphists, Thai colleagues from Silpakorn University, a tentative reading only, not sure, but this is one of the topmost experts in Thailand for Old Khmer epigraphy. And he seemed to read, and I tend to believe him, that we can read Vrak Kamraten Han Shri Shrindra. I can myself confirm this. If this is the case, Vrak Kamraten Han is an old title in Old Khmer for kings and princes, basically. So, of course, we don't know the rest of the name. We only have the beginning of the name, but there are at least 3 possibilities here for kings. Could be Indra Valman II, that we know, being son of Jayavarman VII in the 13th century. Could be the third, son-in-law of Jayavarman VIII, who we know by another inscription dated 1308. This is the title we know, and we know he was a Buddhist and a Theravāda Buddhist ruler. So that will fit very well the chronology here, or it could be this king later in the 14th century. Anyway, we're looking at somewhere in the 13th, 14th century, more or less. This is the article on this oldest Pali inscription we know from Cambodia, Angkor, dated 1308, published by Georges Sedès many years ago. Now, there is actually another inscription on this stele running here at the top, on both parts, running top from left to the other side to right. And the reading here is quite legible. This is the other part. It's in modern Thai or Siamese. And the reading is Paya Si Sahatep Seng Nam Majak Pa Nakhon Wat Quang Muang Semalat Te Wanti Yipsi Minakhon Loso Nung Nung Jet. In translation, Paya Si Sahatep, that's a name. Nickname, Seng, brought this object, this stele, from Angkor Wat, district of Siam on March 24, Rosso, Ratanakosin era, 117. So Ratanakosin Sok, or era, started officially on April 6, 1782. So if you calculate, you find the year 1899. Okay? Paya Si Sahatep, it's a title, it's not a proper name. Paya. And it was a title used in Ratanakosin era for the permanent secretary or assistant, if you will, of the Ministry of the Interior. Siemalat, as you may know, was the old name for Thai during the late this period for what is today the province of Siem Reap. So actually, another object still at the Bangkok Museum, a few meters away, also comes from Angkor. Not Angkor Wat, but Roluos, actually. Prasat Lolei is in Roluos, outside Angkor. And this object also was brought by the same Paya Si Sahatep. We have an inscription here saying the same thing, which was brought one day before, I think, or one day later, I can't remember. So, at the time, we have to remember, 1899, Angkor Wat, Angkor, was still under Siamese control. Siemarat was a province of Monton Bulapa. At the time, they didn't have the same administration system. So, and then later, it's only later when the French took over in 1907, they signed the treaties and they exchanged Siem Reap, Sisopon, and Battambang against Phrat and Chantaburi province. So later on, Siemalat became Siem Reap, which for the Khmer means defeat of Siamese. So the irony. We can only remember, at the time in the 19th century, the importance of Angkor Wat also for Thai or Siamese people. If you look at this model of Angkor Wat kept today at the Bangkok Great Palace. Okay, this is dating from the time of King Rama IV. So there was, for sure, the Siamese had their eyes on Angkor Wat at the time. And so, again, yeah, this is the area we're talking about. So this only became part of French Indochina in 1907 here. Paya Si Sahatep, who was this guy? I know of two Paya Si Sahatep during the Ratanakosin era. First one ought to be ruled out. He came much too early in the time of King Rama III. So that left us with this second Paya Si Sahatep. And actually, there is no possible mistakes because he actually gave us his nickname, Seng. Willi Yasili is his family name, which was added later during the time of King Rama VI. And so we know he was basically the direct assistant of Prince Damrong, Ministry of Interior at the time. And he was in office during this date. So 1899 was just a year after he took office, basically. And basically the reason why he was in Angkor was just to collect taxes. But he brought a souvenir with him. So that's a photograph of our Preah Śākyamuni dated from around 1907. As a young man, he is known for other writings. He wrote a lot at the time on account of the travels of King Chulalongkorn in Europe. That's written by Preah Śākyamuni. So as I said, he was the direct assistant of this Prince Damrong, who is also known as the father of Thai history. Prince Damrong was, of course, very interested in art and archaeology, especially Khmer art and archaeology, but he never made it himself, perhaps for some political reason, to Angkor Wat or to Angkor until much later in his life. This is the photograph of Prince Damrong much later in 1920s. At the time, Angkor was already part of Cambodia or French Indochina. So Prince Damrong here with Georges Sédès and others. This is Preah Śākyamuni later in his life, and he wrote the chronicles of the Champasak Kingdom, published much later in his life. Champasak Kingdom, or Basak, was a kingdom encompassing southern Laos and lower Isan today. This is the map here. Now, why is this interesting, I think? By the way, this is the last prince of Champasak Kingdom, Prince Bunhum, who also was the last prime minister before the communists arise. Now, why am I drawing all this? Because in Laos today, at the Wat Phu Museum in Champasak, there is another copy or replica. This is not the exact size. This is a miniature size of our stele. Okay, so I think clearly there's something going on with this Preah Śākyamuni wandering around and bringing some souvenirs, and because this is clearly another replica that was possibly offered directly to the Champasak family, and is still there today. Now, turning to the second part, the content of the stele, its iconography and style obviously depicts the birth of Śākyamuni, that is the future Buddha or the Bodhisattva, at Lumbini. On the stele, we can see God Brahma with 4 faces, you will see in a picture, receiving the baby or the future Buddha with his hands. And behind him, we see other gods who could be reckoned as what we call the 4 Lokapalas, the 4 guardians of the world in Buddhist cosmology. At the center, you see the mother of the future Buddha, Queen Māyā. Next to her, she's holding the salatri with her right hand. And next to her, another woman who may or may not be her sister, Pajapati, supporting her, and other attendants. So stylistically, it fits rather what we call the late Angkor period or the late Bayon style. Cannot be before the Bayon for stylistic reason. So it kind of fits the epigraphic evidence we had seen earlier. Okay, so here is our future Buddha, Queen Māyā, God Brahma here, and possibly here only 3, but we have to imagine that there was a 4th one behind, Lokapalas. Now, looking at textual sources on the life of the Buddha, there are many. Some are written in Sanskrit, others in Pali, and then you have the later vernacular sources in Khmer, Thai, etc. So I will look at here today briefly at 4 of these most famous biography of the Buddha, 2 in Sanskrit and 2 in Pali. Those are possibly the earliest written down. There's only one line. The Buddha Charita is a poem. It's a verse form. There's only one verse here that discusses the actual birth of the future Buddha. And it says, when in due course he, the future Buddha, the Bodhisattva, emerged from the womb, he did not emerge through the birth canal. So the text says, in translation. The Lalita Vistara elaborates more, and gives a very crucial detail here, I think, for our purposes. Māyā Devi, the mother, stretched out her right arm, not the left, the right arm, grabs the branch of the tree, and then later on the Bodhisattva emerged from his mother's right side by miracle. And then God's chakra, or also known as Indra, or Pain in Thailand, and Brahma, appeared before the Bodhisattva and received the baby. It's only later that, after the gods welcomed the baby Buddha, that Buddha can be brought down to earth and make the 7 steps. This is the Pali canonical version, the Tipitaka, found in the Pali here, in translation. So the mother stretched out her hand. She stood, clinging to the branch of the Sala tree. Then the 4 great Brahmas, interesting, the 4 gods, drew near with the golden net and received the Bodhisattva. And then the Bodhisattva left his mother's womb. And that's it. It doesn't say from where, basically. Whether through the birth canal or not. It doesn't say. But it says that the Bodhisattva came out stretching out his hands and feet in an erect posture. So we can kind of imagine he came through the birth canal. And this is a later, what we call post-canonical text of the life of the Buddha, written in Pali and known only in Southeast Asia and mostly Thailand and Cambodia. It's known as Pattamma Sambodhi. And here, very explicitly, it says the Bodhisattva emerged through the vaginal tract. Clearly. Not from the mother's right side. And then the 4 great Brahmas of the pure abode received him with a golden net. So you see differences depending on sources. Okay, the Sanskrit tradition seems to hold that the Buddha or future Buddha came out from his mother's right side. And indeed, as you will see later, this is the artistic tradition in India. Okay? And it's only later in the Pali tradition, if not canonical, at least post-canonical period, later, that it clearly states that the future Buddha emerged because he was a man, a human being, emerged through the vaginal tract. So, our stele clearly has the baby Buddha emerging from the right side, therefore it would seem to be closer to the Sanskrit tradition, which may have been an oral tradition at the time or in Cambodia. Giving you some comparisons, some visuals to compare with the art of India and also Burma or Myanmar. This is an early example of depicting the birth and other episodes from the life of the Buddha. We're looking at this part from Nagarjunakonda, Andhra Pradesh, Lower India, possibly 3rd or 4th century Common Era. Okay. Māyā Devi, the 4 Lokapalas, the 4 cardinal guardians, the golden net, and at this time you do not see actually the Buddha represented in human form. So you only see the steps here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps of footprints of the future Buddha. This is a later example from Sarnath in Uttar Pradesh, possibly from the Gupta, late Gupta, post-Gupta art. Here's the birth represented. This is the dream. This is the birth. And here you see baby Buddha emerging from the right side. This is clearly drawn from the Lalita Vistara. And you see the god, in this case, I think this is Shiva, God Shiva, welcoming the Buddha rather than Brahma. Okay, so there are some discrepancies always between art and text. This is a later example, yet from Bihar, from the Pala period, 9th, 10th century. And again, baby Buddha here, with the god, possibly Chakra in this case. And these are examples from Pagan, Burma, dated from around the 12th or 13th century. These are stone stelas, so they very much compare to our stele from Angkor. And again, in mural painting as well, the future Buddha always emerged from the right side. He is not standing in this case, he is seated cross-legged, but the point is that he is seen emerging from the right side. Here and here. Although, this is the last example here, although we know very well that at Pagan at the time, Theravāda Buddhism was already in the rise, okay? But the artists still, illustrate what, they knew from Pala art and northern Indian art. This is a relief from coming from Panom Rong in Bolilam province, which it has been argued, I'm not so sure about it, but that maybe it depicts the birth of the Buddha. So I think it was Jan Boeles who published this and discuss. See here Māyā Devi, and this as an aniconic version of the future Buddha. I'm not so sure about that, but I thought I would show it to you. If this is the case, then this will be the earliest representation of the birth in Khmer art. This is a modern painting from Cambodia taken at Angkor Wat in a modern pagoda today. So what you see today is usually Queen Māyā and Prince Siddhārtha stepping on lotuses, okay? And you see God Brahma and God Indra. Okay, so that's basically what I had to say about this tale of the birth of the Buddha. Be aware that there are other steles in stone found at Angkor, which depicts other episodes of the life of the Buddha. So briefly, now I will show you a few of those. In chronological order, if possible. So after the birth, we find this stela, which depicts the enlightenment of Siddhārtha Gautama. This is the moment where Siddhārtha takes witness to the earth. This is the armies of Mara, Revire, attacking, challenging the Buddha. And very interestingly here is the appearance of the earth goddess. As we know in Thailand, she's known as Me Tolani, the earth goddess, depicted as a woman. And so, same size, found also in the Thousand Buddhas Gallery at Angkor Wat. Same style, most likely same date, same period. Produced in the same series, in the same workshop. So we're looking at probably 13th, 14th century still. George Sedes published this piece, and interestingly, he noticed that this is the first time we see here the appearance of, in art, of the earth goddess as such, in Khmer art. And looking at the text, if you look at the biographies of the Buddha, you do not find the earth goddess personified as such, as a woman, like this, wringing her hair, etc. Before this late text known as Patama Sambodhi, again, a post-canonical text composed somewhere in the mid-second millennium, second millennium, somewhere in Thailand or Cambodia, we don't know. This is the Pali, and this is the English translation, which reads, "Then the earth, after the Buddha take witness, which could not resist the accumulation of the perfections of the Bodhisattva, came out of the ground in the form of a woman and stood facing the Bodhisattva. And she says, 'My hair is saturated with the water of merit that you've done in the past lives. And now I will wring it out.' So the earth wrung out her hair and disappeared. The water flowed from her hair like the torrent of the Ganges. In other words, it was like a tsunami washing away the army of Mara." This we know very well in Thailand, also in Cambodia, in modern iconography, in mural paintings and all that. But this is unique to this region. We do not find this in Indian art, okay, or Sri Lankan art. This is not canonical, this episode, okay? But in fact, I found earlier still evidence for this earth goddess in Khmer art. Okay, this is at the temple of Bang Melea, to the east of Angkor. Just as you see, a fragmentary of a gable. Buddha here was represented here, but he was chiseled out during the so-called iconoclastic crisis after Jayavarman VII. And here clearly is a depiction of the earth goddess wringing out her hair. And this is Mara here, attacking and throwing out these arrows to the Buddha. This is the close-up, arrows which become flowers as they touch the Buddha. And there are there's this famous relief at Taprom today, a temple from the time of King Jayavarman VII. Clearly, again, the Buddha disappeared, but here is the earth goddess, and this is the armies of Mara. So I don't have time to elaborate, but we could make... My argument basically is that this motif in Khmer art appears first in Khmer art around 12th century, and it's only later that it was incorporated in the late biographies of the Buddha, as we know today, the so-called Patama Sambodhi. And possibly this earth goddess has something to do with so-called devatas. There's so many of these devatas or goddesses depicting Angkor temples, especially during the time of King Jayavarman VII. This is a modern representation of the victory over Mara. You see the earth goddess here. This is Mara before he challenged the Buddha and after admitting his defeat. In Cambodia, you have the extra, in today, Cambodia, you have the crocodile here. There are several folk legends associating the earth goddess with the crocodile. I don't have time to go into details here, but it's interesting. Clearly, these legends were circulating around for a while. Other stelas of depicting other episodes of the life of the Buddha here. After the Enlightenment, 7 weeks after the Enlightenment of the Buddha receives his first meal since Enlightenment. And this was given by two merchants, Tapussa and Balika. And because the Buddha didn't have a bowl anymore, the gods, the four Lokapalas, come in and offer the bowls to the Buddha, which the Buddha merged into one, so he can receive his meal. So that's what we have here. And this is one of the rare stele for which I have a precise provenance from an archaeological site. This was found in situ at the monument inside Angkor Wat. I have all photographs for this. And this is the modern representation of the Buddha receiving the meal by the two merchants, Tapussa and Balika. And then you have the Buddha here. The Buddha doesn't know whether he wants to keep his knowledge, Dharma, for himself, or whether he wants to share it. And so God Brahma, Savampati, or Indra comes in again and asks the Buddha to preach the Dharma to the world. So this the Buddha will do, and this will become the first sermon of the Buddha. So this is probably what we have here, depicted again in the same style from the late Angkor period. This is a modern representation of the same. And then there is this stele, again, belonging to the same series. Here you see the monkey and the elephant offering a meal to the Buddha. This is a well-known episode during the life of the Buddha, the gift of the monkey and the elephant. You see two monkeys and two elephants, but this is the same. It's part of the narrative. And again, we have exact provenance for this stele from a Buddhist monument at Angkor Wat. This is a modern epigraphy. You are probably familiar with this. You see it almost every day in Thai temples or Khmer temples. See, the monkey offers honey to the Buddha, then he is overjoyed and kill himself. He falls from the branch and kills himself. And then here you have the Buddha taming the mad elephant, the drunken elephant, known as Nalagiri. And this is a modern representation of the same episode. Okay? And then you've got the Great Demise, or so-called Palinibbana, which becomes very popular from the 14th, 15th, 16th century onwards, at Angkor especially. So to conclude, starting with the stele of the birth of the Buddha, okay, probably dates from the late 13th, early 14th century on stylistic and epigraphic evidence. We do not have the ultimate provenance, but we know that it was found at Angkor Wat in the late 19th century. Of course, these stelas have been brought over from a different place. We don't know where, and we don't know when exactly it was taken to Angkor Wat. What we know is that it was brought to Bangkok on March 24, 1899 by these Paya Sisa. Content, the miracle that depicts seems closer here to the narratives we know in the Sanskrit tradition, especially because of the emergence of baby Buddha from the right side, as opposed to later local traditions, such as the Patama Sambodhi. However, I still argue that this stele and this series of stele, because it's clearly a series that we have here, was produced during the transition, the so-called transition between not only Hinduism and Buddhism, but Mahayana, if not Tantric Buddhism, during the Angkor period towards what we call today Theravāda Buddhism. Okay? And so this period of religious transition, we know from other accounts, the Chinese Chu Taquan visiting Angkor in the late 13th century. He also speak about this religious transition. So this will be another additional evidence for this so-called religious transition. And so the lesson here to be learned for art historians like myself is that although we have this context here, historical and religious context, the object that we see being closer to the Sanskrit tradition doesn't quite fit. And so we have to keep our mind that artists do not necessarily follow text, and they can just follow their tradition, their lineage, and so on and so forth. We see the same thing happening at Pagan in the 12th century. So this is another evidence here. Thank you. These are my acknowledgments. And I should add that this is a research project that I conduct on this series of stele from Angkor, called The Life of the Buddha at Angkor. So hopefully I will be able to publish on this. I'm submitting this paper actually to the Journal of the Siam Society. So hopefully you'll be able to read it soon enough. Thank you very much.
Please, do you have any comments or questions? I hope that you'll come back and present maybe parts of your research. Part 2 next time. Please don't be shy. There's a lot of you today, which I'm very impressed. Please.
I'm just wondering from a rather innocent point of view. The Sanskrit version of the Buddha being born out of the right side would imply a miracle. Is that right?
Sure.
Rather than
it's
the
known
other way.
as a miracle for sure. Yeah. Oh yes, no doubt about it. Yeah.
Sorry. It's probably the first C-section you've ever had. Any other questions? Please.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much, Nicolas. Wonderful presentation tonight. You mentioned that Brahma's role here was to receive the Buddha on a golden piece of silk. Mm-hmm. In some other accounts, does Brahma receive the Buddha on a lotus?
I don't think so, no.
Oh, so I've heard that account also.
Okay.
A gold, of course.
I mean, I haven't checked all accounts by any means, but I don't recall it receiving on a lotus as such.
On the silk.
I think just with his hands. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And of course, you have to. Sometimes accounts are silent, and so it is left to the imagination of artists, to fill out the gaps, maybe with lotuses. And
in the one photograph, you have the Buddha being represented as a vase or a vase.
Right, maybe this is one.
Why would you
hypothesis.
assume that?
No, not me. Another scholar believe that. I myself not sure that it is the Buddha.
Why would have?
I think the argument roughly is that in a text like the Lalita Vistara, while the Buddha was inside the womb of his mother, the technical term, Sanskrit term, is Galba something. And so I think it was Jan Bueles who extrapolate that this may be a reason for artists to maybe represent the Buddha not as a human here, but as this galba thing, object. And so he elaborates on that, but I'm not quite sure about that. So I don't think this is what we see here.
Where was that picture again? Where was it?
It is said to be from Panom Rung, Prasat Panom Rung in Burilam, which, as you know, is not a Buddhist temple. It's a Shaiva temple. So I don't really see why it would be there. I'm not very convinced, but I've shown it to you because it's been published here in the Journal of Siam Society many years ago.
This stele was brought back in 1899.
Correct, yes.
But the National Museum opened 20 years later.
Correct, yes.
So where was it kept in between?
Yeah, of course. Good question. It was kept at the Grand Palace, along other objects that are today in National Museum of Bangkok, including pieces coming from Java, which were brought by King Chulalongkorn at the time. And I have seen written references to it in the early 20th century, saying this piece that I've shown you were still at the Grand Palace at the time. But what I would like is to find old photographs of that. So I still have to do more search in the Thai archives and see whether I could find, that would be helpful, to find, to trace these in photographs, in photography, this stele as it was then in the Grand Palace, up till 1926 when this collection was transferred over the National Museum.
And George Siddes was here in the early 20th century.
He was, yes.
And with Prince Damong, so...
That's correct, yes.
So
he knew about it.
Maybe they all knew, and
of course.
They did not write anything about that.
Surprisingly, nobody published about it. They knew.
Oh, very interesting.
Oh, yes.
Thank you very much. It was very
So
interesting.
maybe there was some, political reasons for it, and dispute on political borders. And actually, when I shown that things, to my Khmer Cambodian colleagues, they were not very happy about it. Okay, so there, are, issues here.
I have just wondered, the sandstone piece that you had from Pagan, that is from the Ananda temple, right?
Probably. There are several, but some of them are from Ananda, yes.
Uh-huh. I think that one is from Ananda, but then it would have been from the time of King Kanzitha, right? 1040 to 1060. So it would have been a little bit earlier than what you were mentioning.
This one?
Yes.
So when would you put it? In the 11th century?
From 1044 to 1066.
Possibly.
The time of King Kanzitha.
I could check that again.
I know this piece very well.
Sure.
There's only one that I know of in Burma from that period.
Right.
The Ananda temple from Pagan.
Okay, thank you. There's also this one, which will be later. This one?
This one I don't know.
Yeah. Very similar. I should add.
It looks later. It looks like a later period.
My other question was, what was this stele for? My first reaction at the beginning was this probably was a Sima stone. The boundary markers, the shape, the size. But then I had another thought when I saw so many of these steles and comparing with the material from Pagan. I don't think they were Sima stones. In any case, we don't know where they come from. They're all different. They look similar, but they're different. They definitely show different content. So they're unique in a way, but as part of a series. So maybe what we have here is just worshipping objects that could have been enshrined individually in a Buddhist temple, or maybe collectively, just as we have at the Ananda inside the galleries, you have niches for these stelas, possibly, a series on the life of the Buddha. Now, of course, here I've shown you only a few of those, but in my database, I've got about 20 of these stelas. Some are just fragments, and some I'm not able to identify. It's just the Buddha in meditation or witnessing the earth. So it's hard to say precisely what episode it is, if it is about the Siddhārtha Gautama Buddha, because we have at least one stela that shows a Buddha taking the earth to witness under a Bodhi tree. But there's an inscription on the back that says this is actually Buddha Dhammadasi, a Buddha of the past, as part of the tradition of past Buddhas in the Buddha Ramsa. So you don't have to see all these for the life of the Buddha, Siddhārtha Gautama. It could have been other Buddhas as well.
Anybody else, please? Okay. Thank you very much. Without further ado, I would like to thank Dr. Nicolas Revire again, and we have a little token of appreciation for him.